Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Oliver Moorhouse. He is the head of business development for BrainLit North America, the developer and IP holder for BioCentric Lighting. Oh, we're going to talk more about the health effects of lighting and all that. Oliver has 10 years of global commercial experience, primarily within the health and medical technology space. Oliver's primary focus has been establishing early sales success for European technology companies entering the United States market. Previous roles include VP of Business Development for Cellmark Medical and Senior Business Development Manager at Synergy Health PLC, later acquired by Steris PLC. Oliver was born and raised in the UK. We're not going to hold that against him. Majored in business studies at Nottingham Business School and currently resides in Montclair, New Jersey with his wife and young daughter. So we're going to get to him in a second, but first we got to get focused. We got to go to the original, Greg Eric. We got to go to energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. We're going to talk a little bit about their N-Focus control system, Greg Eric.
That's right, retrofittable and affordable human-centric lighting. Many office facilities that we deal with have fluorescent tubes right now. And the fluorescent tubes turn on and they turn off, and that's about it. But with their system, you have a simple install, network safe and secure, where you can replace your existing fluorescent tubes with the N-Focus LED tube. No additional wiring needed. Change the wall switch, change the tubes, cut the ballast out. You get 10-stage dimming and color tuning capabilities all built right into the tube.
Ooh, go to the originals, energyfocus.com. And if you've already done those bypass lamps, Greg Eric, in those fluorescent fixtures, you can just pop in N-Focus, throw the wall switch on the wall, and Jimmy Tunable has you all set up. Of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, NAILD.org, NEILD.org. Energy Focus is a proud member of that group. And get educated, get associated, folks. Go to NAILD.org. Oliver Moorhouse, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Thanks, gents. I hope you're doing well.
We are. Thanks for having us. Hey, I see right here, as I was reading more about your company, pioneered by the father of Bluetooth, scientifically proven to improve human mind, body, and spirit, the world's first lighting system that can learn from and respond to an individual's unique biology. Before we get into that, who is the father of Bluetooth?
So our founder is a gentleman called Tord. Yeah,
Great tooth.
I like it. Yeah. Very good. I like it. So I found a guy called Tord Wingram, based in Lund, Sweden. So our home market is a 1,000-year-old university town at the very south of Sweden, just over the Danish border. So we fly into Copenhagen, and I think it's still the third most innovative place per capita in the world. 160,000 people. The dialysis machine was invented there, as was the pacemaker, as was Bluetooth. And more recently, in 2012, BrainLit was founded very much as a health technology company, striving to improve indoor environments. First piece of that pillar is, of course, lighting, to promote sleep and improve long-term health, and the ancillary and associated short-term performance benefits as well. So Tord Wingram is our founder and both the father of Bluetooth and the brainchild of BrainLit and BioCentric Lighting.
I'm at the website right now, just looking at my desk here. It's got an IKEA vibe to it.
Very Swedish, for sure.
Who invented the build your own furniture? I want to kill that asshole because, man, I hate IKEA. So they're gonna have to. The Swedes are gonna have to do better than that. But I'll throw it over to Greg Eric to get the podcast going.
Not at all. So tell us more about BrainLit. How is it different? A lot of people have human-centric lighting or talking about it.
Yeah.
But I saw a few things that look different to me, but I want to hear it from you first.
Yeah, I mean, if we start with the end in mind, BrainLit is really sort of an R&D house or an ideas factory. And the last 2 or 3 years have very much sort of been focused on now developing a commercial organization. And the very core IP is, as you rightly mentioned at the top of the show, is BioCentric Lighting. and there's different offshoots in terms of IP of BioCentric Lighting, but the core principle is a protocol. So actually, if you take the Bluetooth model in mind, it's of a connection protocol. If you think like that for BioCentric Lighting, it's a protocol that's a self-learning system that over time, when the user develops a biocentric profile or score, any biocentric environment they walk into, they get their own personalized light recipe. So biocentric lighting is really a protocol to deliver the right type of light at the right time of day on the truly individual level, and that's sort of the uniqueness of biocentric lighting. We're all quite familiar with human-centric lighting and being able to take existing lighting infrastructure and tuning it to mimic certain aspects of the sun. Biocentric lighting drills down sort of into the individual level, and we're launching technology over time that gets us closer and closer to that IPR. Is the best way to summarize it.
And you mentioned that they get a biocentric profile or a score. How does that look? What does that say exactly? Tell us about that.
So, I mean, it's all quite sort of still in R&D phase and but behind closed doors. So, if I reference publicly available information with the patents and the like, ultimately, we can track all sorts of health metrics, and we are today, right? Whether it's pedometer and tracking our steps, whether it's our heart rate variability with great technologies like the Aura Ring or Roop, and of course many others commercially available. The idea is that tracking one's light exposure is another critical pillar of health, which is quite underserved presently. So we want to develop a core principle of tracking light exposure throughout the course of the day through a variety of different methods and means, and of course with information that the user wants to give. A very practical example would be, given how interconnected everything is in the world today, it's very easy to track one's schedule and cross-reference the weather forecast in that particular location, and also via a BrainLit application, the system could also understand when that user has checked in and out of a biocentric environment. So cross-tabulating this one schedule with the existing weather forecast and how often they've been in and out of a biocentric environment, you could create a biocentric score or a lighting score. And if there's a difference between your target score and your current score, the system could deliver a light recipe to top you up, for want of a better word. So that's it's very broad, and there's many directions we could take it, but that's the core concept. Again, to educate the market over time that tracking one's light exposure is critically important to health, and the science is for sure there, and I think it's becoming much more commercially accepted in the market that light's significant, right?
I wonder how unique that scoring system is going to be, because we take the three of us. Is there a chance that two of us have the same score and we are prescribed the same lighting that we need? Or is there no way
Could
of that?
do. Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible. But really, again, I think the critical focus of sort of biocentric lighting is to focus on the unique needs of the individual. And of course, practically speaking, you can't do that everywhere. But what you can do is track your own score over time and influence your own behavior. But really quite fascinating when you start digging into circadian rhythms or sleep-wake cycles. There's a really significant lighting study called the Munich study that said there was above 43 different types of circadian rhythm. So close to 7 billion people have about 43 different rhythms that could be boiled down into three core types: a morning type, an intermediate type, and a late type. So being a night owl is a totally biological thing, and we can influence it, but we really can't change it. So each person has their own score, and then of course their own schedule, plus their own preferences, plus their own sort of medical conditions and the like. So it's quite possible, probably through serendipity, that we might have the same or similar scores, but we all have different individual needs. And I equate it, we recently working very closely with high performance sports teams. Naturally they're looking for a sort of incremental advantage, and the story of BioCentric sort of resonates because athletes, particularly say football players who are indoors for long periods of time, I mean, they're sitting under light anyway, so why not sit under a BioCentric environment and really sort of improve incremental performance? But game time is the same for everyone. So whether you're a morning person, an intermediate type, or a late type, 8 p.m. comes around and puck drop hits, in the NHL, it's game time for everyone. So it's how do you positively influence our natural hormone balance, cortisol, melatonin, to create almost a standard level of care, to use a healthcare term, at game time and puck drop. So it's high performance sports teams are really looking at it from that standpoint, and other organizations in different segments are really sort of looking to leverage biocentric lighting and human centric lighting, of course, for a multitude of different reasons.
And that study you referenced, can we find those details on the 43 different types?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's publicly available information. I don't have the authors and the reference top of mind, but it's publicly available, the Munich study, and of course, our team's happy to share with you all, and you can publish as well.
Now, in order to gather that data, I know I keep bringing back this score and this profile. I read that it says using wearables, sensors, and optionally genomic data. Genomic, whatever the word is there.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Wearables. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so to answer that last part first, the genomic data is around chronobiology, right? So it's when do you best operate, morning, noon, or night? And so and that sort of changes. We have a core rhythm, but of course, many different factors influence that and change over time. A real basic example is you look at the assisted living space. An elderly grandmother, probably has a deteriorated retina versus their grandson who's going to visit them, who's 16. So the type of light that we need to actually stimulate that hormonal response based on our sort of age and health conditions, that changes over time. So genomic data, that's what we mean by that. And then of course, the wearable over time, there's no reason why the wearable can pick up in real time what quality of light you've been exposed to throughout the course of the day. And the wearable can also detect when you're in a biocentric zone, and if that functionality is available, will automatically deliver that light recipe to you. So whether it's an RFID badge, that the nurses use to register or open the door, or whether it's a wearable that we've all seen and used, or whether it's our cell phone to check in and out, it really doesn't matter. But that personal identifier is a real unique add-on to biocentric lighting to be able to personalize the light recipe.
Is there a relationship between race or ethnicity and these 43 different circadian rhythms?
We haven't sort of dug too much into that. What I would say is, from sort of a DNA standpoint, where people are located throughout the course of the world, we've seen a correlation. For instance, South Sweden in the winter is sort of limited daylight hours, and you have a lot of migration from sort of parts of the world like India for software development jobs, and in for being closer to the equator and having lots of access to natural light, so our DNA aligns to that over time throughout long periods of time, and there's been significant issues in South Sweden as it relates to sort of Indian software developers and sort of the negative outcomes, particularly in winter months, where the biological need for lots of access to natural light isn't being delivered in South Sweden. So there is for sure, and on top of that, by the way, someone sort of with a Swedish heritage, the DNA is used to getting a lot less light, in the winter months, then the body sort of counteracts that. So there is absolutely sort of some correlation there, and some practical examples that we've heard with some of our clients in Sweden. And the Nobel Prize was awarded in 2017 out of Rutgers for circadian medicine, which actually found that every single cell in our body has a circadian rhythm or a 24-hour clock plus minus. So it really is down to the gene level, how much light is required and how light influences our well-being. So this whole genomics thing, I think over the next period of time is going to be critical to optimal, not just light environments, but overall health. Of course, as we're already seeing in different oncology spaces and the like.
Is a good way to say that, answer your, because you kind of answered my question, is a good way to say that we see correlations to people that live in southern or near the equator and struggling in the wintertime in places like Canada, Sweden, Minnesota, where where this technology is from, where I live and where Greg lives, and was correlated with some negative health outcomes. Is the lack of certainty, is there some tiptoeing around that a little bit because it's somewhat of a controversial topic to discuss? Is that why it's not, it seems obvious to me, like when, not to be, pushy on this point, but it seems, I think everybody knows in the lighting industry that's at this top level that there's certain people that are geared to living in these high darkness environments in the winter.
Yeah.
And that people that tend to struggle more are people that are from, say the Asian, Indian subcontinent or Africa or something like this. Why is it not being studied more thoroughly?
Well, from my perspective, sort of as a commercial guy working in a health technology company, I probably couldn't speak for the overall scientific industry. But I would say one of the things that BrainLit did, led by Tord in the early stages, is that and you guys operating in the lighting industry have probably seen this. There is a plethora of information around how light influences our health to the genetic DNA level. So I would actually say that the information is out there, and potentially companies need to do a good job of both mining that data and making it applicable and palatable to the general population. And also, secondly, working much more closely with the scientific community, to research topics. But one of the things that we've done is created a totally sort of agnostic scientific advisory board that every quarter, every 6 months, sort of feeds back to the R&D team what the sort of best in class research is and how we could sort of improve our technology to really match what the scientific community is saying. So I do think that the data is there. I think potentially needs to be mined better, and there needs to be some joined up thinking in the industry, which we are getting to. Broad strokes, healthy real estate, we're getting that way for sure, from what I've observed sort of the last 2 years of being involved in BrainLit.
Yeah, there should be a public health message to, if you're feeling down in the winter, consider, these other types of light-based therapies in order for you to, and if you're from any of these communities and recently have come to Canada and suffering from seasonal affective disorder, this is something that you should seriously consider because of X, Y, or Z. I don't think that, I don't think that is a negative message to put out as a public health advisory, especially since so many in the industry are claiming, and I'm not, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, are claiming that these things can really help people. And if that's true, and if it helps some people more than others, then I think there's a duty there to provide information about that. This sounds a little bit of, the initial stages here. This type of technology seems to have a touch of elitism to it. It's expensive. It's difficult to deploy. If we're going to help humans, how do we democratize this sort of stuff? How do we get it to the masses? How do we get these technologies to people that, people have lives. Most people are very busy. Most people don't have the ability to, when they're renovating their house, to look into BrainLit for their lighting systems in their homes. How do we get this technology to the people?
That's a great question. And so what we focused on to date, as BrainLit, is the business to business environment. So the first, we have three sort of product lines, if you want to call it that. LVEN is our enterprise system, so E for enterprise. And we have over 400 enterprise installs, 20,000 people sitting in general biocentric environments, predominantly in Europe, and now, of course, last 2 years we're branching out into North America. And so as a company, sort of that to try and democratize it, and of course, as a commercial company, we need to bring money in to keep developing the technology and growing the business. The business to business route has been a very good one for us to create accessibility to BioCentric Lighting. You get sort of that critical mass of people operating for 8 to 10 hours a day in their work environment, and actually what we found is we towards mission and vision also is high value technology should still be very accessible. So we're to sort of the commoditized light procurement framework, and I think you gents know this far better than I. A lot of leadification has happened because of energy savings, rightly so, and that's sort of a commoditized expectation. So we say we can create the energy savings that you're requiring out, versus any other static or dynamic lighting system, plus the long useful life, and sort of the long-term warranties to protect that as well. So the total cost of ownership is there. So we tick those two boxes, and then on top of that, you get all of the performance benefits for your staff to create that staff engagement, to lower that staff turnover, and create that ROI. Actually, there's no premium to biocentric lighting in that environment, and that's proved a very scalable message. Now, of course, consumers, much more fragmented market segment, harder to create those economies of scale, but we're really leveraging that B2B market, to provide those benefits. And I see it as a hub and spoke model. We're working with a lot of enterprise clients, particularly through COVID, where there's now the new normal, right? Is a very fluid working situation. Yeah, and the new normal. A very fluid working situation where you might come into the office 2 days a week, and there's no reason why companies, and they aren't subsidizing another product line we have called Alven, which is a standalone plug and play floor lamp based solution that can go in the home office. So we're working with a number of high value clients or performance based clients that will put our system in the offices, and they're heavily subsidizing the Alven for their staff as a corporate wellness benefit. So to very long-winded answer your question, we've really focused on B2B to create that economies of scale, create that critical mass, and that's working quite well. And over time, it'll become much more accessible to sort of the consumer themselves.
You said that the science is there for sure. That's an exact quote from earlier in the podcast. I wrote it down right away. First of all, I don't like the word science anymore. I think it's become more confusing than I think what you're saying when you say that is that there's research done by institutions and accountable people beyond the realm of the corporate world, which indicates that certain light criteria based on individual circadian rhythm can lead to better health outcomes. Is that a fair statement to say? When you said the science, that's what you mean. That's what you mean when you said the science. Did I sum it up correctly?
Correct.
Okay, now I'm going to ask my question. Let me ask my question. So, is that research primarily about exposure to sunlight, and that sunlight does help people, and then there's this extension to that that says if we provide similar lux levels or similar color temperatures as the sun, we can achieve those same outcomes or similar outcomes? Is that what you're doing? Or is there research that indicates that this electric light, we've studied it, and it does mimic what sunlight does? Do you understand my question?
100%. And
Okay.
so I'll start with that. It's going to be very hard for any company to compete with the sun in terms of lux. Sun is 100,000 lux. That's not a very energy efficient luminaire and goes against everything we're trying to do in terms of LEDification. So I totally understand the question, and it's the human-centric lighting space in general is sort of a rapidly emerging, a rapidly growing environment, and I would suggest that most of the industry players are what I, rightly or wrongly, just in my simple mind, is backing into the science, and the science is very broad, in terms of our biology, right? So in the early 2000s, we found retinal ganglion cells in the eye that are directly linked to the brain, that when we receive light in certain sensitivities and directions, it stimulates a hormonal response. So there's that biological science. The 2017 Nobel Prize for circadian medicine, that each cell has a biological clock, and the significant influences of that clock is food intake, physical environment, and light. And then it's actually broadly sort of artificial light sources in a variety of different settings, be it GSA buildings, long-term care settings, and the ranges of light that have then improved outcomes. And so I think where we're at today, and agree with you, and in my mind, it's never absolute. When I say the science is there that there's, across those elements, there's research that has created a foundation that, for 2 hours, for a minimum of 2 hours, it's recommended to get above 1,000 lux of light. So what we're doing as a company is taking the very best in class research. There's 7 dimensions of light that are super important to mimic. So the science and research suggests today, which is ever evolving, and we say we can replicate those ranges of light, 1,000 lux for 2 hours, and then change the wavelength curve over different times of day, to create that melatonin or cortisol response. So we're backing into the science with sophisticated hardware, and the added element that is obviously software. And that goes back to the point about accessibility. Actually, to sort of put a bow on that, is we're trying to get to a point where we're future-proofing the operation. So if you've got long, useful life hardware, and it's sort of what the science currently suggests, or research currently suggests, it's sort of specified way lower and way higher in the ranges. And with simple software updates, you can replicate any light environment. And as the science continues, we can sort of create software recipes, which means no more retrofitting, so on and so forth. So I think we've tried to set up the business where there's foundational research and science. Of course, it's ever evolving, and we make, as it evolves, we want to be in line with the science and make that non-invasive to the client over time.
Yeah, I like to delicately step around the word science because there's different interpretations of what that means. I like the word the research indicates.
Of course.
Because and so when science is not settled, but I think when people use the word science, they mean settled. And so I would say that the research indicates. Final question before Greg wants to jump back in here. What I've spoken. Who learned me how to spoke? I've spoken to many researchers and scientists, PhDs, lots of them. And my conclusion to all of this, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that you could do whatever you want with a lighting system. Okay, all manner of things, and it could be fantastic. But if you don't restore natural darkness at night when people are going to sleep, and you disrupt that, that is a fundamental. People are looking at their phones close to their face before they go to sleep. This kind of behavior. If that is not remedied, then most of the gains from the improved lighting is lost, because there is this the idea, and even I'm even kind of on the Starving for Darkness podcast, Greg, we're pushing the idea that the industry needs to become the lighting and darkness industry, not just the lighting industry. And so that we have an obligation as an industry, because of what we know now, to provide good lighting, and I'll leave that to BrainLit to tell me what that is. But then we also need to make sure that people are achieving darkness. And this is super important for shift workers and people like this, that they're able to keep their circadian rhythms in check. How is BrainLit dealing with the darkness factor?
Yeah, another good question, and 100%. It's not absolute, and sleep hygiene is critically important. Element one is in modern day life. You've touched on it. It really isn't designed very well to achieve sleep hygiene. It's constant travel, digital jet lag, social jet lag, screen time, so on and so forth. So I think our particular focus at the moment is if you create good light exposure throughout the course of the day, you can offset, never 100%, but you can offset the risks of poor sleep habits, toward the end of the night. So that's our critical focus, is actually for the 8 to 10 hours a day where we spend 90% of our day indoors in modern day life. What light exposure you were getting that then can have a positive effect and see you out through the course of the day. So for sure, good light exposure does minimize the negative impact, looking at screens at 12 midnight, etc. And secondly, though, it takes some joined up thinking, and so we need to get aligned with voluntary standards, like ANSI, the circadian disruption standard, like the Well Institute, and a variety of light research group, and the like, to really sort of control that 24-hour cycle. So our particular focus is to give good light to offset that, and we're working on lots of great innovation to also minimize the risk around screens, light, and so on. But I think it's an industry-wide effort to really try and influence that behavior as much as possible. But right now, very focused on trying to offset that.
I have a statement, then I'm going to throw it over to Greg, though. But it's interesting. Like, it's almost like the lighting industry should start saying to people, or like the health professionals or whatever, you are not a nocturnal species. You are a diurnal species. Some of us are adjusted to different amounts of daylight, and there's different things, but you're not a nocturnal species. You should consider not wearing sunglasses sometimes when you go outside to expose your eyes to the sun. Not that sunglasses are evil or anything like that, but you should consider more direct sun exposure on your skin and eyes as a way to improve your health. This doesn't mean that sunglasses are not cool anymore. It doesn't mean that certain people that have problems with their eyes shouldn't wear sunglasses. I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that sun exposure is not bad for human beings, and that's a lot of what we've been told over in my lifetime, is that sun exposure is bad. And I think that message needs to get out there, that you're not a nocturnal species and sun exposure is not bad for you. And, and then we go from there. So Greg, you're up though.
Yeah. So relating to this, and I think I'm going to have a question out of it, but just from a statement from a podcast we recently did, another company in Sweden, they did a lot of research and to develop their product. And the government of Sweden funded that research so that they could do it. Are you guys doing something? I'll keep talking, but I want to know what you guys are doing, because it seems like that's the issue that's missing right now, is funding for research to determine what we should do. And I think a lot of companies don't have it or aren't willing to put in their own capital. So maybe we all got to move to Sweden. You tell me.
Well, so the one positive of the many, being a Swedish company, very research driven, and coming from the healthcare services industry prior to joining BrainLit. So a lot of the medical technology, health technology world looks at Sweden for sort of accuracy of data. So I think they're very research driven, and very collaborative by nature anyway. And as a relatively small private company, we are having done two recent rounds of fundraising, a significant portion of that will go to developing specific research and more dialed in research over the next couple of years, around sort of the positive impact of biocentric lighting, on specific groups, and particular patient groups in healthcare. So I absolutely agree, and we agree as a company that we everyone operating in the industry should sort of put their money where their mouth is, and really again be focused on creating a joined up effort. And as I said, I think we've been thought leading by creating a impartial scientific advisory board to mine the existing research that's out there, and that's sort of step one. And we're very early on this journey, right? I mean, you look at again, sort of somewhat of an outsider coming in. You look at sort of LED space. I mean, that's sort of been rolling out over 15 years, and we're still maybe halfway there where we need to be. I mean, it's a long, sustained journey, and I think each company, of course, in a competitive environment, needs to develop technology that offers greater value. But also, we again going back to it, need to have some joined up thinking. And I believe that everyone should invest in the research and the science as well, for sure. And I think over the next year or two, and we'd love to stay in touch, we'll be announcing much more of that, and hopefully adds a lot to the industry as a whole, for sure.
And I think, to Mike's point earlier, of bringing it to the masses, the only way, in my opinion, that it can ever get to the masses is if whatever is figured out is capable. Multiple companies are capable of doing. No offense to BrainLit, but let's say you come up with whatever the right formula is. Every lighting company in the world should be able to do that too. That has the capabilities of manufacturing, so that then we can go out and sell it. Because otherwise, if it's proprietary and no one ever knows, it won't ever get out there. I mean, Mike, do you agree with that statement?
The idea of the platform, open platform, or open ideas, it's, and I want to ask you about the 7 dimensions that you mentioned earlier, but I'm just going to kind of look at that for a second, what Greg said there. The lighting industry has a history of snake oil, okay? All manner of claims, including in the LED era. And I for the Light TED show, Greg, I'm bringing out this bad boy, right? 100,000 hour life, right? Yeah, guess what? It's sitting on the host of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast's desk, right? As an example of hubris gone wild. And so the lighting industry has a history of claims, boxes, lifetimes. Like anybody in the lighting industry that gets asked about, that's been in the game for a long time, when somebody says rated average life, that's a joke. I mean, that's not even, nobody can take that seriously. It's never been correct, and it never will be correct. It's just we put the light bulb in a microwave for a minute and it lasted. So that we're going to multiply that by this, and this is whatever it is. The way they come up with these numbers. But the point being is this, is that this is, I'm afraid, my fear. Okay, so like we were talking with the horticultural fellow the other day, Greg, also in Sweden. That's who you're referring to. Ali, his company. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Heliospectra, yeah. And we spoke to him, and we got into this idea of light, not, the heat and light, that these are not, there's information in that, right? And so the idea that the sun is sending us information, right? Or you can call it meta information even, right? So that in light, we can implant information that speaks to us on a biocentric level. Like that's what you're sort of referring to, right? With this, you have biocentric lighting. What you're saying is that with light, we can tell your body to do healthy things, right? Like produce melatonin later in the evening so that you spend less time on your phone necessarily. Like you said, it's like what we can do is during the day, so that if they actually participate in the system, they will be more tired at night because they've received the light exposure they need during the day. That's how it was kind of like you were trying to answer the question, but when you were answering it, that's what I understood, is that, with BrainLit, there is also this factor of exposing someone to the right amount of light, or whatever the right terminology is, right recipe I think you used was a word, a recipe, and having software that determines that for them. And then that will make them more tired at night. So they're less likely to watch TV all night long or spend time on Twitter on their phone swiping up like this and reading nasty comments or whatever it is, because they're more tired, because they've received the light exposure they need during the day. This is information, and the lighting industry and the researchers around this should look, or meta information, they should consider it and try to, where is the Rosetta Stone that's going to tell us what the information is? And if we can figure that out, you may be unlocking the keys to the understanding the universe, man. I mean, that's how, if the sun can tell a human being to produce vitamin D, can tell plants to grow, can tell people to fall asleep, can tell darkness animals to become awake, and all this is information. It should be treated as such. It's not like an infrared heat wave. Well, we don't need the IR from the heat. We only need the the waves of this light at this. What is the information that's being transmitted from the sun to human beings, to other wildlife, to the sea, to animals? What information is coming from the moon? And people think I'm crazy when I talk about this, except people that are smart and PhDs. They think I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I try to tell my kids about this, and like, Dad, there's no information from the moon. Well, there kind of is. It's stirring the pot. The waves are being brought back and forth, and the tides and all this sort of stuff. There's information there. Does BrainLit, I know you're maybe not one of the researchers, but does BrainLit think about it that way, that it's actually information and we need to decode it?
I would say yes. And again, it's, firstly, there's, in our minds, there's no silver bullet. It's, if you take, again, reverse engineering what the research says, light is agreed to be a significant influencer of our health on a high level. You tailor that down as it relates specifically to the circadian rhythm, managing our cortisol and melatonin to help us sleep, which I think is, the research indicates is the preeminent pillar of health, if not one of the handful of the most important ones. And there's 7 different dimensions, as we touched upon, that right now the research indicates that if we replicate certain ranges across those 7 dimensions or information, then this will help us sustain our natural biology. And so I've never actually thought about it like that. It's a really it's really interesting concept. I've sort of thought about it like we're trying to artificially, as accurately as we can, replicate the natural environment where we're supposed to operate and live. We're trying to replicate that in modern day life to help us maintain our biological rhythm. But so I've never thought about it like that. It's
well,
really
you should think about it like this. Maybe I'll give you even higher level. Maybe people are going to think I'm even crazier. Let's get spiritual here for a second. It's not an indicator or a helpful with, not one of the things that help with human life. It's the creation of all life on Earth. Okay? Like if you think about it, all life on Earth is created by light energy. Period. End of the story. And that there's meta information in that which can impact our human health. And if we can, and the health of the planet, and there's meta information in starlight and the moon, these light energies are coming to our little glass marble here in the universe, and they're telling this one place to make life. And if we can understand that, if we can understand what that meta information says, we can do all manner of wonderful things. In fact, we may, become like unto God, Greg Eric. There you go. I mean, that's the secret of the universe. Well, how does that light do that from that distance, and the moon mixing up the oceans and making the oceans go all over the place? What is that recipe? And what does that tell us about who we are? I mean, that's I think what BrainLit, where it's going, where these companies are going, the ones that are growing the plants, Greg, they're decoding another language, the language of the universe. In the language of God, perhaps, Oliver.
Well, I think I think let's say Rome wasn't built in a day. We're very focused on how light impacts the circadian rhythm, and that is totally our core focus. And once we, interesting. Actually, we did a consumer survey, and it was well understood that light is important to our health. Um, uh, but really interesting, it's sort of underestimated very significantly how much time we spend outdoors. So we do, in general, spend 90% of our day indoors, which isn't natural. On top of that, it's not well understood that artificial light sources can actually deliver the benefits required to maintain a healthy rhythm. And that, to go back to one of your earlier points that sort of was a question, that's a critical element for the industry to get aligned on as well, is that education piece that, hey, we're spending a significant amount of time indoors doing unnatural things, and it's having a really big impact on our health. That, first, high performance athletes and first movers, they're starting to understand, but the general population totally underestimates sort of our negative behaviors. And on top of that, the industry needs to show and validate, to go to the sort of snake oil analogy, like artificial light sources have a true positive impact when we replicate X, Y, and Z range. The other point I would make is, I'm not wonder if you guys agree or not, in the sort of fragmented space of circadian lighting, there's no one standard definition. What does circadian lighting mean? Is it that you can change the color temperature so it looks red like the sun at night? Is that circadian? Or is it wavelengths that are designed to hit your eyes a certain way that stimulate the retinal ganglion cells? Or is it delivering different light at different times of day? And yeah, it's there's no one standard definition, and whether it's biocentric or something else, we need to get to that point, right?
First of all,
And
Oliver,
everyone needs to do their
if
bit.
you want to ask questions, you need to start your own podcast.
Yeah.
No, but
Fair
no,
enough.
I couldn't agree with you more. I love the way you said the fragmented. I think that's exactly right. Is that it's very fragmented, and I'm going to say companies like BrainLit and the other ones in the space, Energy Focus is one of these companies. They're really pioneering the way into this area, and the idea, this human-centric umbrella that we're putting over top of BioCentric, circadian. And I would put into that like preventing slips and falls using lighting, helping, various dementia patients. There's like a whole bunch of little subsections of human-centric or integrative lighting, or however you want to. It's like an umbrella that has these different veins in it that are going in different directions. There isn't a consensus, but I think we need to start trying. And to respond to the question, get a grip on lighting is searching for the answers, brother. And that's what we're about here on this show, and we welcome everybody. But we're embedded in, when I leave the studio, when Greg leaves the studio, we go and try to sell light bulbs to people. That's what we do every day. And so it's not an ivory tower operation here. We are embedded within the lighting industry. We are on the front lines of that industry. We deal with customers and contractors every single day. And so what happens when people come and get a grip on lighting is they get a dose of the reality of it, like how difficult it's going to be to actually deploy this on a mass scale. What is it going to take? And then what comes with that is sometimes there's a fiduciary duty. Like Dr. Mark Ray, I spoke to him, and he thinks the lighting industry has a fiduciary duty to promote some of this stuff and to get it into people's hands and sell it to them. Some of these solutions around the dementia patients and the slips and fall prevention and all this sort of stuff. Like, if you don't do this, you're not doing what you're called to do. Now, I don't think we're there yet with circadian, but I love the fact, Greg, like companies like BrainLit and that are pioneering into this space boldly, in a sense. And, I'm not giving you an advertorial here, but I appreciate what BrainLit's doing, Greg Eric. What do you think?
I do as well. And to answer the question from my standpoint right now, if somebody were to ask for that, human-centric lighting, BioCentric, whatever term they want. I would say, I don't know what the answer is, but you can change your colors and you can change your output. That's what I'm going to give you right now, and then you figure it out, or we'll tell you down the road. That's all. That's where I'm at from my standpoint, and I think the industry that's out there selling it is at too. Until it's to a point where we know here's what will work, all we can sell right now is choice.
Yeah, and before I ask for some final thoughts, Oliver, I see tuning, easy tuning of lighting. So like people love dimmer switches, right? They're also gonna love tuner switches. Like as long as it's no apps on the phone, just like Energy Focus does with the switch on the wall, where you can just tune the light. That's the gateway. That's the gateway for the consumers into this, is telling them that lighting spectrums can be changed, right? And you can do it. We'll start off by giving you the choice. Go to End Focus. You can start to see that you can tune your light. Oh, okay. And then we can go to sort of a prescribed reality where it's like, okay, now that you know that lights can change, consumer, colors can change, spectrums can change, outputs can change, and they can be dimmed and risen by your hand on the wall, why don't we program that for you so that now you can use this for human health outcomes? So I think the BrainLit sort of option is going to stay elite for a while. It's going to be for high-end architects and designers, and we have some calls here actually for home builders that are building these homes, and that for very wealthy people. But I think once those standards are set, you're entering the early adopter phase, Oliver. You actually have products to sell. They're pretty good. They work in certain instances. And so we got to get through this early adopter stage where people are going to pay $50,000 for a TV, and we'll let them pay their $50,000 for their TV, but eventually that TV is going to be $700 and everybody gets one, right? That's kind of where we want to go. Do you agree, Oliver? And what are some of your final thoughts?
No, I do agree. And it's a step-by-step process as one company, be it BrainLit or anyone else. And then I think companies need to reflect on where they fit into the ecosystem, because a light environment is quite a complex thing. You have the luminaire, and you need the very best luminaire manufacturers and suppliers. You have the light control, you have the user interface, you have the software recipes, and everyone needs to take a real close look of where they fit into the ecosystem. And I really think that there needs to be a lot of collaboration, because again, going back to it, circadian is very fragmented, and you've mentioned on this on this podcast 5 or more companies that a procurer or a customer might view as sort of competitors to BrainLit. And I might argue we're actually all very complementary. And if you took a joined up view, you could create a really best in class light environment and building management and others. So I totally agree that we're very much in that first mover phase. And we are very pragmatic, and as I said, we sort of we tick the box on the sustainability element, the energy element, and that's where a lot of, in our sort of home market of New York, a lot of the conversation is still around, rightly so, energy savings, the sustainability piece. But to your point, where's that human sustainability discussion coming in? And everyone needs to say that message. So very long story short, very much in the first mover phase. It's up to private individual companies to A, figure out where they really fit in, and B, price it as such where it becomes very accessible. I believe we do both, and take a long-term view in terms of the trick is this can never be obsolete. It needs to be non-invasive and over time be able to be prescribed, as you say. And again, lastly, regulation. I think there's one voluntary standard in Canada, but where's the others? And why are they only voluntary? And so regulation and moving, we have to tick the box on energy, but it has to take a step further around human sustainability. And I think with maybe next 2, 3, 4 years, we'll see that regulatory piece really drive this as well.
I'm going to agree with all of that and add one more element. and that the industry needs to set up some kind of monitoring where there is where we're monitoring for positive outcomes. We're looking for anything negative that may be coming from this, and completely transparent and open with the public, where if a mistake is made, it's not covered up, and so on and so forth. Like that idea of monitoring the post installation results and sharing them on an industry platform would be incredible right now. And it's nothing to be afraid of, lighting industry. Let's do it, because this is a massive market that will open up to us and everybody will get rich. So just let's make sure we do the right thing, folks. If you made it this far, I know Oliver and Greg, I can speak on behalf of them. Thank you for listening. If you want to check out BrainLit, go to brainlit.com, BrainLit. But Greg, the original. Come on, man. The original.
That's
Energy
right.
Focus.
Check them out for their retrofittable and affordable human-centric lighting tubes that you can retrofit into an existing fixture, change the switch on the wall, give your customer the choice of the light they want.
Cheap and ready. Not cheap. Well priced and ready to go. I have them right here in the studio with the switch on the wall. Go to energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. Thanks to them. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org, nailed.org. And, if you haven't joined yet, I'm not going to let you in anymore. I'm going to shut it down. No more members. We have told you guys all along. Get in here if you're a distributor. Or an electrical distributors are welcome too. So come on down. Check us out, nailed.org. Thanks for listening.